The Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Plant, or PORTS, was a massive fixture on America's front lines.
In the production of uranium-235 for military use.
For nearly 5 decades, PORTS processed uranium, critical to making America's nuclear bombs and fueling its nuclear navy. Now closed and partially dismantled, PORTS is ground zero for claims of radioactive contamination.
I mean, the risk is here.
In nearby communities, now riddled with rare cancers.
We've got, alarming cancer rates
that are killing children.
That was my best friend, and my son.
The U.S. Department of Energy, or DOE, which oversees PORTS, insists radiation around the plant is at safe levels. But some radioactive particles in the air here are not uranium that you'd expect to find, but something much more deadly.
The chemical and radiological toxicity associated with plutonium is many, many times worse than uranium.
In this 2019 report, Dr. Michael Ketterer at Northern Arizona University announced he found plutonium isotopes in sediment and dust around the plant. And in 2017 and 2018, this DOE air monitor, 3.5 miles from PORTS, picked up neptunium-237 and americium-241, both byproducts of plutonium. But PORTS processed uranium. So where did those plutonium and plutonium-related particles come from? After nearly 2 years of digging through these government documents, I uncovered a surprising but likely source: Russia.
Russian-based fallout, it's in the community.
Jeff Walburn was a top-level anti-terrorism responder and security inspector at PORTS for 3 decades.
It was the worst of the worst.
To understand how Russian radioactive material ended up here, we have to rewind the clock back to November 9th, 1989. That's when the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed. As the world celebrated the end of the Cold War, a huge stockpile of Soviet nuclear warheads now threatened to be sold on the black market to dictators around the world. So, the U.S. developed a plan.
Congress got into a deal to bring Russian warheads.
That deal was a program called Swords to Plowshares, or Megatons to Megawatts. Under it, the U.S. bought thousands of Soviet warheads and converted them to enriched uranium to be processed into fuel for America's reactors. In 1994, the Russian radioactive material began arriving in America. And as this government map clearly shows, all of it was shipped to one destination for processing: the Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Plant here in Ohio. The Russian material was coming in.
Contaminated Russian material.
Which they knew.
They knew.
While top-level administrators at DOE and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC, knew the details of the program, Dr. David Minuta, the chief scientist at PORTS from 1992 to 2000, who was supposed to sign off on what was being processed at PORTS, says he was never told. You never knew Russian material was coming.
That is correct.
As a matter of fact, you just found out.
That is correct, sir.
How shocked are you by this?
I'm actually beyond shocked. I'm appalled.
For those in charge of the Swords to Plowshares program, questions about what Russia was sending began right away. In this transcript from a 1994 meeting of the NRC, the CEO of America's now privatized nuclear industry admitted initial testing of the Russian material revealed excess supplies of plutonium and other dangerous elements. 2 years later, in 1996, that same CEO indicated those issues had been resolved, telling the NRC everything they have delivered has been well within specification. But according to this 1999 GAO report, concerns about the Russian material ratcheted up. The report noting 1/3 of the shipments from 1995 to 1998 were not subject to transparency measures, meaning the shipments were not thoroughly examined. And the GAO added there was a deliberate decision by the U.S. government to have the radioactive material rapidly removed from Russia. As this graphic from that report reveals, from 1995 to 1998, 1,487 metric tons of enriched uranium were delivered from Russia to the U.S. That's the equivalent of 2,040 nuclear warheads. And all of it was delivered directly to ports before it shut down in 2001. If you knew this was material from Russia, including plutonium, that was coming into your plant, what would you have done?
Would have asked them to stop, immediately stop.
That's because Dr. Minuta says Ports was not designed to handle plutonium. Yet, as the documents reveal, plutonium was in the Russian material and processed at Ports.
And it was deliberately kept away from me.
Does it all make sense to you now about the contamination in this area?
Well, it accounts for a lot of the contamination.
Duane Pohlman, Local 12 News. On Google Earth, a massive nuclear complex comes into full view. This is Mayak. For 40 years, it was a secret site in the former Soviet Union, critical to building nuclear bombs.
I name myself daughter of closet city.
Nadezhda Kudapova grew up in the shadow of Mayak, believing in Soviet propaganda. I talked to Nadezhda on Zoom from her home in Paris, where she's lived since 2015.
We created plutonium for nuclear bomb.
Nadezhda's patriotic view of the plant grew darker with time as she began to connect Mayak to contamination and cancer around her. Did you see cancer, death, everything related to this facility?
Yes, of course.
Dozens of nuclear accidents at Mayak have been well documented and confirmed by Russia, including a massive explosion in 1957 that irradiated thousands of square miles, making the area Nadezhda grew up in one of the most contaminated places on Earth. Nadezhda told me many of her relatives died from cancers and diseases, including her father, who she says worked at Mayak.
He suffered from the very hard cancer of stomach. It's very hard memories in my childhood.
Nadezhda says she tried to blow the whistle on Mayak, but was charged with espionage and forced to flee to France.
I was threatened by 20 years of prison.
If you're wondering why I'm focusing on a facility on the other side of the world, well, that's because Mayak is central to an American plan to dismantle Soviet nuclear warheads, convert them to enriched uranium, and ship that radioactive material here to the Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Plant, or Ports, in southern Ohio.
The Congress got into a deal to bring Russian warheads.
That deal was called swords to plowshares, or megatons to megawatts. U.S. government reports reveal thousands of tons of enriched uranium converted from those Russian warheads were shipped to ports throughout the 90s. Jeff Walburn, who is a top-level security inspector and anti-terrorism responder at ports, spent decades researching government documents and says the Russian radioactive material sent to ports was contaminated with dangerous impurities.
It was the worst of the worst.
And as this government map clearly shows, the road for those Russian radioactive shipments to ports leads back to 4 Russian sites, including Mayak. This is the place where we got our stuff from?
That's who you got in bed with.
In this transcript from a 1994 meeting of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC, the CEO of America's now privatized nuclear industry admitted initial testing of the Russian material revealed excess supplies of plutonium and other dangerous elements. In 1996, that same CEO told the NRC the Russians asked, "Would you mind if we gave out-of-spec material with plutonium in it?" The CEO assured the commission everything they have delivered has been well within specification. But 5 years after shipments began arriving to ports from Russia, the General Accounting Office, or GAO, issued this report stating 1/3 of the shipments from 1995 to 1998 were not subject to transparency measures. Around ports, plutonium and plutonium isotopes, which are far more dangerous than uranium, are now being picked up by government air monitors. And this independent study found plutonium isotopes in river sediment and dust collected from homes near the plant. When I told Nadezhda, that Russian political refugee, what we uncovered, she was stunned that America would ship anything from Mayak.
I have never heard that they transported the nuclear materials which could contaminate American soil. And for me, it's very surprising.
While Russia isn't the only source of dangerous elements at ports, it's clear shipments from Mayak and other former Soviet facilities did appear to include at least trace amounts of plutonium, which leads that former top-level security inspector and others to question whether contamination and cancer in American communities is connected to Russia.
Do you think Russia got the better of us?
Oh, they got the better of us.
Duane Pohlman, Local 12 News.
Complete transparency, period.
Congressman Tim Ryan's demand for transparency led him to call for a meeting on Friday with Pike County leaders and the U.S. Department of Energy, or DOE, to, among other items, discuss serious questions raised in my investigation, fallout from Russia.
You know, it's first time you see it, it is shocking.
Over the past 3 weeks, I've laid out details of a U.S. program called Megatons to Megawatts, where thousands of former Soviet nuclear warheads were converted to uranium, and the radioactive material shipped to the Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Plant, or ports, for processing. While the program was made public at the time, my investigation uncovered documents from the General Accounting Office, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and other sources that appear to indicate some of those Russian shipments were contaminated with at least trace amounts of plutonium, which is far more dangerous than uranium. DOE, which oversaw the program and regulates the plant, disputes my reports, stating in part, there is no evidence over the 20 years of safely implementing the program to substantiate the claim that plutonium of any amount that would be significant for public health and safety was part of these shipments.
How you doing?
But DOE has yet to agree to sit down for an interview with me to clarify its position.
Are you able to comment?
I caught up with Ike White, senior advisor for DOE's Office of Environmental Management, as he was leaving Friday's meeting.
So that was all uranium from Russia.
No plutonium.
No, it was uranium.
You never had plutonium in it.
Not that I'm aware of.
Government monitors around ports have picked up plutonium-related particles in the air, and an independent report identified plutonium isotopes in river sediment and from dust collected inside homes surrounding the plant. When asked if plutonium was present at ports, White would not answer.
Yes or no, did you ever have plutonium at the plant?
This plant was intended to process uranium.
I understand.
Yes.
That doesn't answer
So
the
that's what
question.
that was what
That
the
didn't
process
answer the
was.
question. Did you
I
have
appreciate the
plutonium?
opportunity.
Did you have plutonium?
While White walked away, internal documents I obtained from a former high-level security inspector and an OSHA investigator clearly show plutonium was present at ports while it was processing the Russian material. Samples gathered at ports in the mid-90s by an inspection team from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory were tested, revealing plutonium inside the plant in solid, liquid, and gas forms. In 1995, the laboratory issued this official Moody report, identifying and listing several forms of plutonium inside ports. And in this memo from 1998, an inventory list at ports notes plutonium is present inside the plant, including a 55-gallon drum containing both plutonium-238 and 239.
I'm glad it's getting coverage. I'm glad it's getting the attention.
Pike County Commissioner Jerry Miller is pleased I'm investigating. So is Health Commissioner Matt Brewster.
You're in our corner and we appreciate that. You know, all we want is the truth.
But truth surrounding this Cold War plant can be elusive, which is why Congressman Ryan says he's serious about getting real answers to the questions raised in my investigation.
And so I think we are now obligated to ask the Department of Energy to be completely transparent and release all the information that they have.
So you're making that request?
I'm making that request.
And if they don't comply, what do you do?
Well, we'll take it to the next step.
a step that could include an official congressional investigation. Duane Pohlman, Local 12 News. I'm suiting up in full protective gear to join Charles Chick Lawson in a trip up to his attic. The reason for caution is clear. The dust up here is radioactive. Dr. Michael Ketterer, a renowned environmental radioactive expert, confirmed that in his Arizona lab. After analyzing wipes Lawson used to collect dust, Dr. Ketterer issued this report on June 21st, writing, "The dust samples from Lawson's home contain enriched uranium," adding some samples contain 2 to 3% enriched 235 uranium, approaching the grades of material used in U.S. light water reactors. In a Zoom interview with me, Dr. Ketterer confirmed his findings.
It's most definitely strongly enriched.
How long have you been here?
36 years.
And it's highly radioactive.
Yes.
Lawson is a former OSHA investigator and union safety officer at the Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Plant, or PORTS, the now closed facility that enriched uranium for America's nuclear bombs. A gas release at PORTS left him disabled.
As you can see, I'm on oxygen. I have chronic beryllium disease from working at the plant.
He's also the guy who tipped me about contamination and claims of cancer around PORTS nearly 3 years ago. Did you ever think that that long road would lead here to your home?
I was afraid it would, and now that it has been confirmed, it terrifies me.
Fear triggered Lawson to test his home in the first place. His wife Kimberly has a thyroid condition. His son Chaz has a tumor at the center of his brain. His daughter Carissa has a tumor as well. How big is that tumor that you've been dealing with?
It wraps around the spine.
Even 4 of the family's dogs have had cancer. Now, dust in Lawson's attic is confirmed to be riddled with radioactive contamination. Does this explain the problems with your family?
I believe it does.
Just as startling, Dr. Ketterer concluded in his report, the source of this enriched uranium is beyond question the PORTS facility. Even though Lawson's home is 10 miles from the plant, 4 miles beyond the radius, the U.S. Department of Energy is testing for possible contamination around PORTS. To be absolutely sure of his findings, Dr. Ketterer sent us back to the attic, which is why we're up here, vacuuming as much dust, debris, and dirt as we could find. We got a bag full. After analyzing this latest batch, Dr. Ketterer delivered this report on October 18th, concluding the levels of uranium, including enriched 235 uranium in Lawson's attic, are nearly 3.5 times higher than what should be there. The concentration of enriched uranium in Lawson's attic is even higher than the amount that closed Zons Corner Middle School, which is 2.5 times closer to PORTS. So it's more dangerous.
It's more dangerous uranium by virtue of its isotope composition.
Dr. Ketterer also found neptunium-237, a radioactive byproduct of nuclear reactors tied to processing at PORTS. Neptunium was also picked up in 2017 by this air monitor across the street from that now closed middle school. Dr. Ketterer says it's clear the neptunium and enriched uranium came from only one source.
It absolutely spells that contamination came from Portsmouth.
Radioactive contamination that he says is a real threat.
They're alpha-emitting isotopes. You don't want to breathe them in.
But the Lawsons have been breathing and living in this home for decades. Are you scared?
Yes, I'm terribly scared.
And because he lives so far away from PORTS, Lawson says others should be worried too.
I believe this whole area is radioactive.
Duane Pohlman, Local 12 News. On a sun-drenched day, the shadow of sadness follows a father.
You do carry it.
Larry Farmer is making a somber journey that's become routine.
3 to 4 times a month.
To visit his son at Mound Cemetery.
I come in here and talk to Zach.
Zach Farmer was an All-American pitcher at Piketon High and a rising star at Ohio State. Zach's dream of making it to the big leagues was stolen by acute myeloid leukemia. It killed him in 2015, just 8 days after he turned 21.
You're never going to find peace.
Zach grew up in this home, along a government fence, a little more than a mile from the Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Plant, or PORTS, the now-closed Cold War facility that enriched uranium for America's nuclear bombs. PORTS dominates the landscape in Pike County. So do cancer and death.
Oh, you know there's many more. Sure. Yeah, and a lot we don't know about.
But just how bad is it here in this southern Ohio county? For the answer, I traveled to Ocean City, New Jersey.
Very much.
Joseph Mangano, a renowned epidemiologist and executive director of the Radiation and Public Health Project Research Group, got funding from the Ohio Nuclear Free Network to conduct the first comprehensive study of cancer and death in Pike County.
Up until you did this, no one did this.
No.
No one has looked at this.
No.
And I got exclusive access to his findings. On his computer, Mangano showed me how he retrieved data from the Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, and the Departments of Health to get a true picture of mortality in Pike County.
These are people that actually died.
The results published in this report stunned even him.
And it is shocking.
When ports began operating in the 1950s and 60s, Pike County's death rate from cancer was 12% below the national average. By 2019 to 2020, Mangano discovered the cancer death rate had shot up to 32.8% above the U.S. average.
The fact that the change occurred from the 1950s and 60s to now, the period of time when the Portsmouth plant operated, does raise the question, what role did Portsmouth play?
Even more stunning, from 2009 to 2020, the cancer death rate in Pike County for people under 75 years old is now 50% higher than the rest of the country.
We're talking the top 100 in terms of death rate from cancer.
Yes, there are fewer than 100 that have a higher rate than Pike.
And most shocking, the overall death rate in Pike County for people 74 years and younger from 2017 to 2020 is 85% higher than the rest of the country.
Pike is almost double the death rate.
The death rate in Pike County is so high that in pure numbers, it boils down to 2 extra deaths a week.
That's alarming.
It should be to anybody who is concerned about the health of its residents.
The U.S. Department of Energy, or DOE, insists radiation around ports is at safe levels. And Mangano says more study is needed before concluding the plant is directly connected to cancer and death here. But he says ports appears to be an obvious candidate. What else could it be?
It's got to be the leading candidate for such a dramatic and abrupt change.
Back at the cemetery, Larry Farmer says he's not surprised by new data that proves people are dying at high rates here.
You knew it. Yeah. So's everybody else around here.
And he says it's equally clear to him what's causing it.
The fallout. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, whether it's in the water, in the land, or in the air, that's what you're getting.
Duane Pohlman, Local 12 News.
Well, for a growing number of families who live near a Cold War plant, Father's Day is a reminder of the children they lost to cancer.
Tonight, Local 12's chief investigative reporter Duane Pohlman revisits 2 local dads that he first interviewed nearly 2 years ago to get their reaction to what he uncovered in his investigation called Fallout.
On this field, dreams are in play. A decade ago, one dream turned into a legend when Zach Farmer became a 3-time All-American pitcher at Piketon High.
Zach was in the prime of his life.
Larry was Zach's coach and his dad.
You feel close to Zach out here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is his element.
We talked behind the net at home plate.
Yeah, it always brings back memories.
Zach was so gifted at baseball, he had an offer to go straight to the big leagues. Instead, he chose to become a Buckeye. But before he could reach the pinnacle of pitching, life threw Zach a tragic curve. He was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, a rare and vicious cancer. In 2015, a week after his 21st birthday, Zach Farmer died. When I began my investigation fallout nearly 2 years ago, Larry Farmer sat down with me for an in-depth and emotional interview, blaming his son's death on the Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Plant, or PORTS, a now-closed Cold War facility that enriched uranium for America's bombs and reactors. And Larry blamed the federal government as well. It still oversees the plant.
So you believe the government's responsible for the death of your son?
Yeah.
Larry says he feels guilty too. He raised Zach here, just a mile and a half from Ports. While he can't prove it, Larry believes radioactive particles produced at Ports triggered the leukemia that claimed his son.
Are you convinced it was related to the plant?
Sure. Yeah, nobody will convince me anything else.
Since our first interview, Larry says he's watched what I've uncovered, from high cancer rates to dangerous radioactivity inside a now closed middle school, and radioactive particles picked up by the government's own air monitors, to working with a mother who set up her own air monitor and a scientist at a lab in Arizona who proved contamination around Ports is connected to the plant, to my latest and most stunning find, proving radioactive shipments to Ports from Russia were contaminated with at least trace amounts of plutonium, which is much more dangerous than uranium. The U.S. Department of Energy, which oversees the plant, disputes much of my reporting, insisting there is no radioactive threat posed by Ports, that people in homes and communities surrounding the plant are safe. Larry Farmer disagrees.
Well, you feel that, somebody lied to you.
So she was 15 when she died.
Larry's not alone.
I think the whole community, the whole county should have known, not just people that work there.
Wayne Smith's daughter, Kate, died in 2013 from a rare cancer called rhabdomyosarcoma. She was just 15 years old.
Yeah, I miss her every day.
After his daughter's death, Wayne took a seat on the school board, voting to close Zons Corner Middle School after enriched uranium was discovered inside.
I would close the school down because I wouldn't want no other kid to go through what my daughter went through.
Other children who attended Zons Corner developed cancer and died too, including Zach Farmer.
How do you go on?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think about it all the time.
This monument marks Zach Farmer's record-setting run at a baseball field that now bears his name.
No, this should have been him, and it shouldn't say a memorial field.
While the words and picture in stone pay homage to one of the greatest pitchers to ever take the mound, Larry says his son's death is also a tragic testimony of cancer that continues to claim young lives and steal dreams.
Do you want answers?
Oh, absolutely.
Do they owe you one?
Me and a whole bunch of other people.
Duane Pohlman, Local 12 News.
Local 12 has been investigating radioactive contamination and cancer claims around a Cold War plant in southern Ohio for years now. But we've gotten few answers from Washington about the many issues we've already exposed.
That's about to change as Chief Investigative Reporter Duane Pohlman shows us what he uncovered is now triggering Congressman Tim Ryan to demand documents and answers.
For decades, people living in the shadow of the Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Plant, or PORTS, have felt alone, facing growing evidence from the government's own data that this now closed Cold War plant that once processed uranium for America's nuclear bombs is spreading radiation.
It's a nightmare.
Causing cancer.
We've got, alarming cancer rates.
And death.
That was my best friend, and my son.
The U.S. Department of Energy, or DOE, which oversees ports, insists there is no threat posed by the plant. But over the past 2.5 years, my investigation uncovered children dying from rare cancers.
They took something special from me.
And air monitors around ports capturing dangerous radioactive particles. And an environmental radioactivity expert in Arizona confirming that ports is the source of the contamination.
Do you believe it spreads out much further than what it is?
It has to, it's obvious.
Plus, my investigation uncovered documents revealing Russian radioactive shipments to ports with at least trace amounts of plutonium.
It is shocking.
5 months ago, my investigation stunned Congressman Tim Ryan, who promised to ask tough questions.
Complete transparency, period.
This month, Representative Ryan made good on that promise, sending this letter to Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm, asking many of the same questions I've been asking of DOE for years.
You're demanding answers.
Yeah, we want the Department of Energy to absolutely come clean.
Coming clean, the congressman says, means full disclosure.
And I am just not convinced that we have all the information that we need.
In his letter, Congressman Ryan, who sits on the House Energy and Water Development Committee, which oversees DOE, cites my on-air reports, referring to high cancer rates I exposed, as well as the deaths of Zach Farmer and Kate Smith that I focused on, from cancers that Ryan's letter points out can be induced by radiation. Plus, Ryan's letter cites reports from Dr. Michael Ketterer, who helped me prove the radioactive contamination is coming from ports. And Ryan's letter zeroes in on the megatons to megawatts program I highlighted, where 20,000 nuclear warheads from the former Soviet Union were processed into uranium and shipped to ports. My investigation uncovered documents proving those Russian shipments contained at least trace amounts of plutonium, which is far more deadly than uranium. In his letter, Ryan states, my reports raised serious questions related to the safety and security management of the megatons to megawatts program.
We know the uranium, but now it looks like plutonium, which is outrageous.
Duane, good to see you. You as well. In May, when I tried to get answers from a senior advisor for DOE's Office of Environmental Management, he walked away.
Did you have plutonium? Did you have plutonium?
Congressman Ryan is not only asking tough questions, his letter is also demanding documents, including raw data and official reports of sampling and testing of Russian shipments of radioactive material shipped to ports. And notes, reports, and testing data cited in this report from the General Accounting Office, or GAO, about those Russian shipments. And the congressman is asking for declassification of a secret GAO report we could not see. Plus, Ryan's letter asks for raw data from all monitors around ports from 1994 to present. That includes data from this air monitor at Zahn's Corner, which picked up plutonium-related particles and is across the street from a middle school closed after particles of enriched uranium were found inside.
To construct a new middle school.
While Ryan's letter was sent in the midst of his run for Senate, he insists his push for answers about radioactive contamination around ports and its connection to cancers rises above politics.
What do you say to those who might suggest that you're doing this for political reasons?
Go meet with the families. There's not a human being that could sit there and listen to what these families have gone through, and if you're in a position of power, not do everything you can to try to help them. You know, just because there's an election doesn't matter to me.
Do you expect to get complete answers?
I'm going to be like a dog with a bone on this thing. I'm going to get the answer, and that's my commitment to those families.
I asked for an interview with J.D. Vance, Representative Ryan's Republican opponent in the Senate race, to ask what he would do about what I've uncovered. He declined, but sent me this statement. Ohioans deserve the full truth of what's happened, including the extent of the environmental and health impacts on Ohio families and communities, he wrote, adding, as senator, I'll fight for answers, accountability, and action. By the way, a spokesperson for the Department of Energy tells me DOE will reply to Congressman Ryan's letter and will cooperate with his request. Of course, I'll let you know what happens next. I'm Duane Pohlman, Local 12 News.
And a good evening to you on this Thursday. I'm Kyle Inskeep.
And I'm Marella Porter. A Local 12 investigation of radioactive contamination and cancer around a Cold War plant in southern Ohio captures more attention in Washington.
And today, a U.S. Senator toured the Portsmouth gaseous diffusion plant to see its impact on the communities surrounding it. Chief investigative reporter Duane Pohlman has been exposing issues around that plant for more than 2 years now, and he was there for today's visit.
Senator Manchin's visit here is about as big as it gets. He chairs the powerful Energy Committee, which oversees the U.S. Department of Energy, or DOE. And around here, most people don't trust the DOE, saying it's ignoring obvious signs of danger. So today, Senator Manchin joined Congressman Tim Ryan in a search not only for answers, but solutions. Duane Pohlman with Channel 12. I'm Joe. Senator Joe Manchin joined Congressman Tim Ryan not at the now closed uranium processing plant, but here at Zahn's Corner, where this middle school closed more than 3 years ago when particles of enriched uranium were discovered inside. You realize how important your visit is here to Pike County. That's why I'm here. Children who attended Zahn's Corner and who lived near the plant died from rare cancers. My investigation exposed air monitors picking up radioactive particles around ports, including plutonium-related particles that could be connected to shipments from Russia. DOE insists there is no threat posed by the plant. Are you concerned about what you're hearing?
Absolutely. I come from the state of West Virginia, and I said my whole state's made up of Pike counties.
Senator Manchin took the controversy head on, saying he'll join Congressman Ryan to demand answers from DOE. You're in one of the most powerful positions to do something here.
Well, I'm chairman of the Energy Committee, so we have oversight of DOE. We have oversight of the nuclear program in the country. So there's answers to be had here.
That's good news for Pike County and for Ryan, who has ratcheted up his push for answers from DOE following my investigation.
We need answers, obviously, and having Senator Manchin here is a huge step for Southern Ohio.
No question, this is a huge day for Southern Ohio, and it's far from over. Next week, I'll show you how my Fallout investigation is now triggering a very real demand for specific answers about what's really going on here. That's next Thursday at 6, right here on Local 12 News. For now, I'm Duane Pohlman in Pike County.